Alrighty, everybody. It is currently Sunday, March 2nd, 2025. And the question you're all here to ask, if you're a man listening to this, you're definitely asking this question. If you're a woman if you're a woman that's just listening to random podcasts, you're definitely also here to ask these questions. When are we going to be able to make sweet, sweet love to these robots? Will they integrate robot technology with real girl technology? Will she be a bitch? And the answer is we already have robots for pounding off. There are robots that can pound you off. And I've seen these robots. I've done my research. I've looked at them. I've analyzed them. I've analyzed every aspect of them. I've simulated my own here at home, my own technologies. You know what I mean? I turned my toothbrush into a pounding off machine. And I've come to the conclusion that you don't want that. All right. I've seen these robots. I've seen what they can do, and the only answer I can conclude from this is yes, the robot can pound you off, but should it? Should the robot pound you off? I can't imagine a more lonely feeling than getting pounded off by just a lifeless robot, and then just like the shame afterwards. This like cleaning it up, or even worse, not cleaning it up. I just can't imagine like a worse feeling than that. I think I'd rather see someone die, see a loved one die than have to deal with that feeling, that like just the mental anguish of just cleaning up your spunk after a robot pounds you off, or even worse, not cleaning it up. Like I said, it's just in there, just smelling up the whole house. I can't imagine unless they make some sort of reusable sleeve. Maybe that. I don't know if there's any people that design pounding off robots listening to this, but make like a one-time use sleeve for the robot. Is that a condom? Is that what a condom is? I might have just figured it out. Maybe you don't have to feel the most like shit. You do have to kind of feel like shit because a condom is for sex and you're not having sex. You're having a robot pound you off, but still better than nothing, you know? Actually, no, it's not. It's far worse than nothing. Nothing is so much better than that because at least in nothing you can be like, well, at least I didn't buy a robot to pound me off, but at least I didn't buy the auto blow 2.0 or whatever it's called. I don't know what the name of it is. I don't know the name of the pounding off robot, but yeah, I think doing nothing is better than buying the pounding off robot. So that's the conclusion I came to in all my research, and that's really, this episode has no point after this because that's what everyone's wondering. The vacuuming robots, that's cool, but like I can kind of enjoy vacuuming. You know what I mean? Listen to some nice music while you vacuum. So I don't know. I think the only robot that just fits all of society, that's like would be a constant in society, is a pounding off robot, and I just I just don't think they're that good. Now, how far away are we from the Megan Fox Severance robot? Probably pretty far. Probably pretty far from that. But as we'll talk about, the limitations of robotic engineering mostly come from the fact that it's really hard to make them practical. Like, you could make a robot. Like, you've probably all seen that video of like that humanoid robot like dangling from like a fucking meat hook. Like, it's like a serial killer, like a fucking ISIS torture video or something. It's, if you haven't seen the video, it's just like this robot that has like pseudo skeletons and pseudo muscles in its body, right? So it's really human looking. Like, you can see like its muscles, quote unquote, like moving underneath its skin and stuff. It's horrifying, And so you don't want to pound off with that unless, I don't know, unless you're a fucking serial killer. Maybe that's how we stop the serial killers. We give them these fucking robots that just like twitch and like kind of act like they're not dead but like dying. Maybe that's how we stop the serial killing. Who knows? That is what they say about pedophilia. Just give them like robots that like are like little kids. But I mean, what's the cost? I think killing them is probably the easier option. Just everyone that like orders like a kid robot, the fuck, just instead of like giving them a kid robot, just go to their house and shoot them in the head. I feel like that's maybe the easier option, and it's a long-term solution. I think that's what we have to do. Or we can make a robot that does that, instead of like put a Glock on a Walmart drone Have that thing just fly right up to the house. We have your kid, robot. And then just fucking boom, out of the kid robot box, nice gun to the face. Or you could make it comical. You could go with like some Bugs Bunny shit and have like a boxing glove come out and like smash them right in like the part of their head that like kills them instantly. You could do that. Or you could have like some kind of paralyzing robot. We've got some ideas. We've got some things to talk about, and we'll talk about how we're going to make these robots later. But I think I have to get into it. I don't want to overextend myself too much. But this episode is not going to be good. I have not been eating a lot. My brain is, it's on the edge, and fucking, I'm trying these new supplements. It's like this, so I take ashwagandha, right? And I was like looking on Amazon for some ashwagandha, and I found this one that's like, it has all these other different like plant compounds in it, and one of them is turmeric. And so I took this pill today, and this is the first time I've taken it, dude. I was like coughing up a lung, like the turmeric, like. And whenever I take pills, even if I like chug water while I'm taking them, they like sit in my throat, and I think they start to dissolve in my throat because I got like a wet ass throat, you know what I mean? And so it was just like this turmeric getting in my throat, and I was just coughing it the fuck up. Robots don't have to deal with that problem. And what is a robot? I was kind of confused about this. So here's like the rundown of what a robot is, like kind of like a definition. A robot is a machine capable of carrying out a complex series of actions automatically. Computers are not robots. I was kind of confused about this. I guess a computer can be used in a robot, but it's not a robot. Robots have to be capable of navigating and interacting with their environment. And somehow this includes virtual environments. I don't know how I think that's just a computer. I don't know. Is it ChatGPT? Is that a robot? I think it might be, right? Because it does things automatically, and it like interacts with its virtual environment, right? It can like search things up and stuff. So I think ChatGPT is a robot. I think AI is a robot. It's like a virtual robot. Robots can be controlled externally or internally. So I think ChatGPT is an externally controlled robot because, right, it's like on your computer, but like the thing that controls it is like in probably like a server or like a computer far away. So I think AI is a robot. It's an externally controlled robot, and an internally controlled robot would be it's all self-contained. Like it doesn't have to be connected to the internet or anything. I don't know. A robot is basically just a mechanical / virtual body. It's like this thing that can interact with its environment. Basically, that's what a robot is. It's kind of confusing, but I think the more I talk about it and the more we talk about how they're made and stuff and the things that go into making them, I think it'll make more sense later. So we're going to get into a brief history of robots. And this shit is, I did not know they were making robots way back then. They have been making robots in like crazy advanced shit. Like when people talk about like how technology like changes overnight, it doesn't really change overnight. It's just like happening in the background. It's not like one day someone discovers like fucking AI or whatever. Like they've probably been working on this since like the early 80s, and just now it's like coming out and it's like getting really advanced and stuff, and it has a practical application, but it's probably existed for 30 years at least. I don't know. That's kind of a complete guess. That could be completely wrong, but from what I understand about the history of it, these things have existed far before they exist in like the general space, you know what I mean? In like the zeitgeist. I don't know. I'm just busting out fancy words so that I don't have to properly explain myself. Like if I could bust out a word that like I feel like a lot of people know zeitgeist. I am kind of retarded, so all like the fancy words I know everyone else knows, but that's, you know, like that's like a general theme in robotics and just technology as a whole, and science and pretty much everything, is that these things have existed for a long time, but it takes a long time to get them to a place where they can be used practically by a lot of people. So the history of robots. The first robots were able to perform tasks with internal systems based on hydraulics and pneumatics. So pneumatic is like air-driven power, and hydraulic is water-driven. And then there's also engines, which are driven by gears. So those are like the three basic things that like power like the physical movement of a physical robot. Once again, virtual robots, we're not going to get into that too much. Early robots may have been made as far back as 270 BC in ancient Greece. And this could be just complete nonsense because many cultures' mythologies have stories of mechanical men or like something like that, like a man made out of metal or stone or something. And that, if something is made out of stone and it can perform a complex task or really a task of any kind automatically, then it is by definition a robot. So a lot of these, especially the Greeks, like the Greeks have, I think it was Hephaestus, who was like the god of like blacksmithing or whatever, or like metalworking, something like that. He made like these automatic men, and so that is a robot. And so that's why it's kind of hard to tell between like myth and reality, especially back then, because allegedly this robot, it was like a pigeon. I guess that's the first thing they thought of. I don't know. I really thought the first thing they thought of was like a make it a bad bitch or something, but no, it's a pigeon. And it was like powered by steam, but like they didn't really have steam power back then. I don't know. That could be, I could just be making shit up, but I don't think he made a robot in 270 BC. The first proof of humanoid robots dates back to the 3rd century China. Yan Shi, who was said to be a, what was it, like an animist or something like that, someone who could like make things move. Like that was his title. He made a humanoid robot and he presented it to the king, and it was an automata. Like that's what they called it back then. They didn't have a word for robot. Automata is basically just, it is what it sounds like. It's a thing that can like move and operate on its own. It doesn't need any human input. It needs like one human input and then it can like do something. So that's what an automata is. And he presented it to the king, and allegedly it was made out of leather, wood, and artificial organs. And what I think they mean by artificial organs is either some kind of pneumatic system, hydraulic system, or like some kind of gear motor system. But obviously they didn't have, my guess is gears, because I don't know, I just don't think they had like pistons and like hydraulics back then. I think that takes like a super high level of like, it has to be really precise, and I don't think they had the technology to make hydraulic and pneumatic pistons back then. They might have. I don't know. And then we kind of chill out for a little bit. They were like, all right, I can't fuck this thing. All right, I'm done with it. And you also got to think about how terrifying it must have been to fucking, you know what I mean, like present your robot to the king. Because he's either executing you on sight, he's either like, dude, this guy's going to make an army of these things and overthrow me, or he's going to be your best friend. It's really a big gamble. You got to like, if you have like a king that's like, you can tell he's like kind of autistic, you know what I mean? If you have a king that's like obsessed with like coins and stamps, you're like, all right, let me show me this robot to him. Fucking, he'll probably fuck with this thing heavy, dude. He'll never have to talk to another person again. He's probably going to be so hyped. So I think you kind of got to feel it out. And I think we probably had a lot more robots, but dudes were just getting their heads chopped off for making them. And so we don't know what happened to it. And they just threw that thing on a fire, and they were like, get this beast out of here. And so they kind of chilled out for a little bit. Allegedly, I don't fucking know. But in the 13th century, Muslim scientist Ismail al-Jazari made several hydro-powered automata. Al-Jazari and other Arab scientists are credited with creating the idea for practical applications of robots. And so pretty much every other automata or robot or whatever you want to call it that existed before this was just like a novel thing, just something to look at for fun. And these guys invented the idea. So one of the things Al-Jazari specifically invented was a gate that could like be open and closed automatically. I think it was a hydro-powered gate that could be open and closed automatically. And so once again, everything is the Muslims' fault. It's all their fault. All our gerbs are getting replaced by robots. Once again, it's the Muslims' fault. All right, that's why we fought in Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 years, and that's why we're destroying Palestine. All right, you guys invented the things that took all our gerbs. All right, it's a little bit of karmic retribution. You can just always just find a group to blame something on and just do that. I think that's what most people do. That's how you make it through life, you know what I mean? Everything's the president's fault. Everything's, you know what I mean? Just find someone, blame everything on them, and move on. Because what are you going to do? You're going to blame yourself for everything? That's a lot of fucking work, dude. And you know what? That means you have to, like, improve and shit? Nah, just blame it all on everything else. So that's what I'm doing. Al Jazeera, you motherfucker. Al Jazeera is probably the name of, like, some, like, You know what I mean? Like some kind of leader over there who's not the nicest guy ever. So maybe I'll chill out with the. I'm talking about Ismail al-Jaziri, all right, the scientist. And this was during the Islamic Golden Age when like Islam was like, and Arab and Islam at this point are kind of people use them interchangeably now, even though they're really not. But during this time, they kind of were because Arab and Islam. So Islam started in Saudi Arabia, so it was an Arabic religion, and really only Arabs at this time were Muslims, and so they were going out and conquering everything, and like colonizing like North Africa and like kind of like parts of Europe and stuff. And so this was part of that. I don't know. He was like making while they were doing all that, he was making gates and shit. So I feel like that's also a pretty good deal on his end. You know what I mean? You don't have to go out and like fight a bunch of retarded dudes in a field somewhere, and you're also retarded. So it's, you know what I mean? It's not that bad. It could be worse if you're if you're both retarded. It's not that bad. So yeah, he created the idea for practical robots, and experimentation with robotics remained fairly like impractical. These were practical solutions, but they were like esoteric practical solutions. You know what I mean? Like most people aren't like, oh fucking, I need this thing to open and close my solid gold gate. Most people are like in a field like cutting wheat and shit. So during this time, or during up until the late 19th / early 20th century, which I still feel like is pretty early, people were making robots, but they weren't really practical. You know, like they could play chess or like pick up a block or something. They weren't like fucking going into fields and like harvesting all the wheat for everyone or like fighting their wars for them. They were, you know what I mean, pretty esoteric, like only applied to a few people. That's what esoteric means. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about remote control systems, which I'm going to say is like one of the first widespread practical applications of robotics. And the reason why remote control systems are robotics is because you do control it remotely, but within the thing you're controlling, there is an automatic system. So therefore, I guess technically, it is a robot. And so in 1877, Irish inventor, we didn't see that coming. I can see like the Islamic and like the Indians and stuff, and maybe like some Western European, maybe some of those guys, not really though, inventing some of this shit, but Irish, I really didn't see that coming. I thought this was going to be like some whiskey making robot. No. So Irish inventor Lewis Brennan demonstrated the first practical guided missile. And it was remotely controlled, but it was still connected by wires. Dude, they had guided missiles in 1877. This is fucking insane. And we're going to talk a little bit about World War I and World War II. Dude, they had shit, like modern shit. They were controlling robots remotely. It was fucking crazy. But this thing, yeah, it was still like connected to wires and shit. And a few other people had remotely controlled systems, but they were all physically connected to another thing. You know what I mean? They weren't remotely, or I guess technically that's remotely controlled, but there still had to be a wire leading back to like a control system. So they were kind of remotely controlled, kind of depending on how you look at it. In 1898, Nikola Tesla created the first wirelessly controlled torpedo, and he tried to sell it to the government and shit. I think in like the early 1900s, he tried to sell this to the government, and thank God he didn't, dude. Thank God the government didn't get their hands on this remotely controlled fucking missile technology. Because a torpedo, I don't know what makes a torpedo different from a missile. I think maybe the way it flies or like moves or something. Or maybe a torpedo is like a specialized type of missile. But a torpedo can operate. It doesn't have to be in water. I looked it up. I don't know. We're not talking about torpedoes this episode, all right? We're talking about robots. And he made a wirelessly controlled torpedo, and the way it worked was with radio waves, and that's how most of the early, or all of the early wirelessly controlled robots worked, with radio waves. And so you'd send out a wave, and it would be like turn left or turn right. So it was fairly simple, but still, fucking guided missiles in like the early 1900s is fucking insane. In 1903, Leonardo Torres Quevedo, he's a Spanish scientist, so probably not even close to it. Those Spanish names, dude, they're like 13 words long, 98 syllables. They get like Q's next to X's and shit. let's just change it all to James Smith. All right, right? Why can't it be something simple like that? Let's. Your last name is Quevedo. All right, we're gonna change that to Quentin. All right, let's chill the fuck out with these long ass fucking names with letters that shouldn't be in the same word, let alone right next to each other. But anyway, he demonstrated his radio control system Telekino, which I mean, sick ass name, dude. Back then, scientists were just doing whatever. He was like, I can fucking control this thing with his mind. No, he didn't say that, but he did call it Telekino, which is a pretty sick name. And he controlled a airship. So like a fucking blimp or like a hot air balloon or something. He controlled it remotely with a fucking radio wave system. All right. And in 1904, he controlled a tricycle with it, and in 1906, controlled a full-sized electrical boat at over 2 kilometers away. And there was like people on the boat, and he was like controlling it remotely. And 2 kilometers is about a mile and a quarter. So that's how long. So fucking a pretty far distance away. For back then, dude, like people were still like lining up and shooting each other, and this guy had a remotely controlled boat. So yeah, fucking insane. And during World War I, Archibald Lowe, an English scientist, began working on and demonstrating radio-controlled planes and rockets, dude. They had fucking drones and not heat-seeking, but like remotely controlled fucking rockets in World War I. That's crazy. All right. Fuck, I didn't write it down. But in World War II, oh no, I did write it down. And so that's kind of like the basis of remote control systems, is that they started with radio waves and now they use the internet, which I don't know if that's a radio wave. It has to be, right? It has to be a radio wave. It's like traveling through the air and shit. I'm going to say it's like a special type of radio wave. Maybe it's like a really fast kind. Is that what the internet is? Is that what Wi-Fi is? It's a radio wave? I don't know. I'm still saying we're rocking with radios. But this dude, fucking Quevedo, let's just call him Leo, all right? The fucking Spanish scientist who controlled the tricycle. Dude, being a pedophile and seeing that must have been like, oh shit, dude, I can control tricycles remotely. I'm about to fucking get him, dude. What's up with pedophiles and robots? Why do they love robots so much? I don't know, but dude, just being like, I don't even have to fucking touch him and I can get him in my house, dude. Fuck, I got a fine little shorty I'm gonna give this remote controlled tricycle to. Don't worry about all those wires, baby. Just take the tricycle. Then you fucking steer him right in the garage. All right. In early robots. So, at this time, even though they had like practical applications of robotics, they still weren't really used because I guess people would rather just send other people to die. I guess that was the thing, maybe. I don't know. Because like a remote controlled plane, maybe he couldn't control it from very far away. But they did call Archibald Lowe, the guy who made that remote control plane, the father of like remote systems, or the father of remote control systems. So I feel like his shit must have been pretty fucking good, right? He must have been able to get at least a few kilometers. And in World War I, it was just one trench, and then like a mile away was another trench. So I feel like that's, maybe it's because you can't see the plane. I don't fucking know. I feel like that would have been like, I would have been on that shit if I was the fucking, and that's probably why my side, whichever side I was on, the American side, because I'm a patriot, but we probably would have lost World War I, because I would have been like, we don't even have to send these dudes over there. Yeah, get this plane going. I'll just let these dudes die in this trench of disease and shit while this plane does all the work. But yeah, I guess they weren't on that shit, And World War I was definitely like, they were still like, war is an honorable thing. We cannot do this. We cannot have this plane do all this shit. War is honorable. This war of 17-year-olds dying in mud, it's an honorable thing. No. I would have nothing of that's that's what they were on. Like I said, this episode is not going to be very good. I really can't even form a complete thought if it's not about a pedophile right now. All right, so anyway, early robots. So several humanoid robots were made during the 1930s, but all of them were human controlled, if that makes sense. Like the robot, you would like press a button on it and it would like, there was one that could like smoke cigarettes and like drink beer and shit, which sick as hell. The first robot they made was a fucking beast. Pretty sick. We're getting off on the right foot here. He's smoking cigarettes. One of them could play music, or no, he could talk, but the way he talked was with he had like a record player inside of him basically. And this was all in like the 30s and like late 20s, like 1929. So basically all in the 30s. But yeah, they were all human controlled. And so they weren't, a dude would like press a button. And another one of them was, I think, remotely controlled. So it wasn't completely autonomous. And a dude, it was like voice controlled, but it was just him like talking to another dude who could like hear him. And then the dude would like control it with radio waves. So they weren't, you know what I mean? They weren't like what you might think of as a robot, is what I'm saying. Like they didn't operate completely on their own. And in World War II, the Nazis created the V-1 flying bomb, which could automatically guide itself on a predetermined course. And so I would say this is like probably one of the first like completely autonomous robots. Like it obviously wasn't programming because the Nazis didn't have computers and shit, but maybe like an analog computer is the best way to put it. And so you'd put all these inputs into it and you'd adjust its robot in a specific way and it would fly the missile on a predetermined course. Or not missile, bomb? I don't know what the fucking difference is. But yeah, we had guided or not we. No, definitely not we. Definitely not we. But we as in humanity had fucking guided missiles during World War II, basically. And so this other guy named William Gray Walter, and this is, I think, 1948, so a few years after World War II, made the first autonomous robots with complex behavior. And William Gray Walter, by the way, was from Kansas City. Even though he was allegedly British, he was from Kansas City, so we're claiming this one, all right? I'm going to say it right now. William Gray Walter, he's one of ours. And I feel like William Gray Walter, we got to switch the Walter and Gray on that one. I feel like William Walter Gray is so much better, you know what I mean? Get that nice alliteration followed by a one-syllable last name. I feel like the Gray, like, breaks it up. You could just go William Walter, but I think he should have switched it around. I'm going to say it. Even though he did all this shit, you know, William Walter Gray is better. I feel like we can all agree on this. But William Walter Gray, goddamn, William Gray Walter, he wasn't a robotic or like an electrical engineer. He was a neurophysiologist who wanted to prove that complex behaviors could arise from only a few brain cells. So he was more so interested in how a simple thing could move. And this is also at a time when like they were just like getting started on how like DNA worked and how like these intricate microbiological processes worked. And so that's what he was interested in. And so he wasn't like a robotic engineer at all, but he still made these things. And Gray's tortoise robots were, even though they had like simple computers, he didn't make this with a computer. They were analog. I think maybe an analog computer. I feel like that's a thing. But they were electrical powered and they were capable of phototaxis. And what phototaxis is it means something can see a light source and move towards it. And this applies to neurophysiology and like biology as a whole because that is the most like simple form of like sensory interaction with your environment is being able to see a light, or maybe not the most basic, but the most basic like light-based form. You know what I mean? Like we can see all like these complex colors and stuff, and like we can see texture. The most basic form of that is just seeing a light and moving towards it. And like that's what the ancient, you know, ancestors of all life could do. They could see a light and they could move towards it. And so maybe this had something to do with evolution. I have no idea. But yeah, these were analog robots. And I think it said that like this form of like making analog robots like paved the way for everything else. Like even though computers are sick, I think the analog aspect of it was somehow important. I don't really know. But the first digitally operated and programmable robot, so like the first computer robot, was invented by George Devol in 1954. And it was called Unimit, which, I mean, that is fucking daunting, dude. Unimit. I feel like that's like an AI that like infects every computer on Earth and like takes over the fucking world. I feel like that's the name of it. So he gave this robot a scary ass name, but I guess people were fucking with it because in 1961 General Motors bought the Unimit, or one of the Unimits, and they put it on an assembly line in Jersey. So a bunch of fucking retarded South Jersey dudes working on an assembly line were like, "What the fuck is that? Hey, get over here. What what is that? Is that a Mexican? That's gonna steal our jobs. That's a fucking Mexican. I feel like, that's what they were doing. They saw this thing and they're like, that thing's stealing my job, dude. I'm the one that puts the hubcaps on. What the fuck is he doing? And this was so William Gray Walter's robot, this analog computer phototaxis robot, the tortoise as they called it, was it was just 3 wheels, all like the aspects of it that make it move, and then there was a shell over it. But this robot was like, it was like an arm. So it was like, if you've seen any of the How It's Made shit, that show that fucking all dads watch all day and just sleep in their recliner and watch, that robot that just like it moves its arm and like picks things up, and like you've seen it before. That's what this robot was. And so yeah, in like the early 50s, late 60s, these things were being implemented in factories, which is fucking, I guess that makes sense. Because, all like the factory shit got either moved overseas or replaced by robots in like the 80s. So I guess it makes sense that it was happening in the 60s. And then the future of robotics is AI, allegedly. I have no fucking idea. Like I said, I don't even know what AI is, so it very well could not be. But the reason AI is the future of robotics is because it can just allow the robot to operate almost completely autonomously. So that's why AI is the future of robots. So that's kind of an overview of like the history of robots and shit, the history of robotics and how we got here. So now we're going to talk about the aspects of designing a robot. So the first thing you got to do when you're designing a robot is focus on mechanical engineering and kinematics. And this is like the skeleton of a robot. I have like human equivalents to all these aspects of a robot. And so this part focuses on how the robot moves and how its structure can allow it to, how its structure can allow it to move and how its structure is affected by those movements, right? So basically it's like, if you want a robot that can like move its arm up and down, you have to worry about how it moving its arm up and down, is it going to like bang into a table super hard? Is it going to be able to move its arm quick enough? And then also, how moving its arm will affect its structure. Like, will it make the arm break? That's what we kind of have to worry about here. And I'll talk about that in a second. So kinematic models are used to control the robot. Essentially, kinematic models are used to gain an understanding of the physical processes of how a robot can perform a task. And so an example of this is you need a robot to pick up a block. And I'm going really simple examples on this one because even I don't understand it really. I say that like I'm a really smart person, like even though I don't understand it. So you guys definitely are. No. But even I, the person that read about it, doesn't really have like a full grasp of it, obviously. Like people study this shit for like years and years and years. But a basic example of this is you need a robot to pick up the block. And so you make a kinematic model of how it's going to pick up that block. So the robot must lower its arm, move its fingers to their correct position, and then move its arm back up to pick up the block. So that's like an example of like a very basic kinematic model. And like how we need it to move its arm to this exact position, and then move its fingers to this exact position, and then move its arm back up to this exact position. And that's also part of the kinematic model, is getting it to move in an exact way. And also another aspect of mechanical engineering is the materials and actuators of a robot are selected based on its intended function. And so this is just like pneumatic versus hydraulic pistons, or like an electrical motor, steel versus aluminum, that type of thing. That's another thing you have to consider. And we'll get into how they select that a little bit later on. And then the next aspect of robotic engineering. So you can make a robot that's just purely mechanical and with only kinematics. And that's like an example of these early robots, like that robot that could smoke a cigarette. You just had to like make it so like the gears moved in a certain way to bring the cigarette to its mouth and then away. That type of thing. So you can make a robot just using mechanical engineering and kinematics. And then a layer you can add on top of that is electrical and electronics engineering. And this is kind of like the nervous system of the robot. So electrical systems are used for power, internal communication, and control. Distributing power efficiently requires sophisticated circuit designs. And so this is kind of like the nervous system of the robot. And the way our nervous system works is, the way I say it is the nervous system is because or the reason why is because your nerves work based on an electrical, a chemical electrical reactions is how your nervous system works. This is just kind of pure electrical. And so the circuit design is kind of like, if you've ever seen like a biology textbook and stuff, like the way your nerves like go from your brain and spread out through your whole body. It's kind of the same thing. Instead of a brain, it's a battery. And instead of nerves, it's electrical circuits. So it's kind of basically the exact same thing. In order for robots to properly interact with their environment, they need sensors that can accurately interpret the environment and relay information in a usable way. And all of this can be done somehow, I don't fucking know, without computers. So, an example, if you have 3 blocks on a table and you want a robot to pick up the smallest one, you need a sensor that can differentiate between the blocks and relay the information in a usable and efficient way. In a way that doesn't, overload any of the circuits, in a way that can be interpreted by the robot, whether it's the robot has a computer or not. I don't know how you're going to do that without a computer, but somehow you can. Then the final step of this, or the final step of creating like a usable modern robot, is software engineering. And this, each one of these things is like built on the other. You know what I mean? Like, you can't have a robot that has like just electrical circuits and stuff. You need like a kinematic physical thing, obviously. And then you can't integrate software into your robot without that circuit system, because how is it going to communicate with itself? You know what I mean? So each one of these things is built on top of each other. In software engineering, this is like the brains of the robot, right? And you don't need a computer in the robot. Like I said, it can be remotely controlled, but most robots do have like an integrated computer within it. And so software controls what the robot does, when it does it, and how it does it. I feel like this kind of all means the same thing, but it doesn't really. So what the robot does, picks up a block. Well, there's 1,000 different ways you can pick up a block. You can pick up your block with just your thumb and your pointer finger, or you can pick it up with your thumb and your middle finger, or you can use your middle finger and your pointer finger. So there's a bunch of different ways. So that's how the robot does it. When it does it, that one's obvious. And then, so how and what are related, and then when. Fuck it, no one's even listening. I don't know why I'm explaining it. But that's kind of like a basic overview of the point of software engineering. Embedded systems work directly with the robot's hardware. So, yeah, it's like one system that controls like just one specific joint is kind of how that works. Instead of coming from a central point, it comes from the actual component of that robot itself. That's kind of the difference. It's like if your hand had a mind of its own, and your shoulder had a mind of its own, and your elbow had a mind of its own, and you just like programmed them to all do the same thing every single time. That's kind of an integrated system, or not integrated, embedded system. And so embedded systems operate in real time and process sensor input to trigger appropriate actions. All right. Once again, I'm going to try to explain this using like your arm picking up a block as an example. And so there's a block in front of you. You go to pick it up. So first it moves your shoulder down. And then let's say you miss the block the first time. The system in your hand, like if your hand is its own entity, the brain within your hand is like, move your hand to the left. The block isn't there, now move your hand to the right. All right, the block is there, pick it up. That's kind of how it works in the most basically explained way imaginable. And then many software engineers use robot operating system, and ROS is a framework which can be used to design the communication network between different parts of the robot. And so you're looking at the whole aspect of the robot. I guess this isn't an embedded system. I don't think, because an embedded system would just control one specific part, unless I don't know what an embedded system is, which I probably don't. But a robot operating system is like a framework. So it's like a bunch of basic code that like you can adjust to do what you want it to do. That's kind of how it works. Robot software systems have to be designed to maximize efficiency in both processing power and time. And so this is kind of an example of how you would design a software for a specific robot. So a robot needs to put 3 blocks in a bag in a particular order while only using a certain percentage of its processing power. So a robot has to put 3 blocks in a bag from smallest to largest, and it can only use 10% of its processing power because it has to use the rest of its processing power for something else. Or it has a limited processing power because you can't give it all this electricity. All this electricity will overload the system and it'll overheat the computer. So you have to design a piece of software that can do that in this confined environment. And that's like the main obstacle within, or one of the main obstacles within robotic engineering, is that you're very limited in how you can do things. And that's why we don't have the hot robot that can suck our dicks and fucking cook us food and shit. All right, because it's so limited. All right. And so I guess this is part of software engineering. So there's 2 types of control systems for a robot. There's closed loop control systems, which rely on continuous feedback from the sensors to adjust the movement or behavior of the robot. It's kind of if this, then that. So what I was talking about earlier, which is like pick up the block. The block isn't there, move left. If it's not to the left, it's to the right. It's that type of thing. So it's you try one thing, and then you try another, and then you try another until it works. And another type of system that can be used is adaptive and nonlinear control systems, which are used in complex or changing environments. And I don't know how this works, but it's not if this, then that. It's if this, then a third thing, then not that. Like that's basically, it's just not a closed loop control system. I don't know how to explain it. All right. So we got our history of robots. We know how we got here. You know what I mean? We got our history. We got our culture. We got all this shit. We got how to design the robot to do what you want to do, or how to, like, the aspects that go into making it do what you want to do. But how do you make it? How do you actually make the physical robot or the virtual robot? I don't know how a virtual robot is a robot. I think that's just a computer. How to make it. All right. How it's made. That's what we're doing. Simulations are used to determine how the physical aspects of a robot will interact with itself and its environment. Will this part break if it goes too fast? Is this hand, quote unquote, precise enough to pick up this super small thing and put it over here? Is it precise enough to, solder all this shit? That's what these simulations are used for. And they're used to, like, gain an idea of what materials to use. So this is kind of like the kinematics aspect of designing a robot, is this specific part. And I think maybe everything I have here is kinematics and maybe a little bit of electrical engineering. And I assume you use the simulation to get an idea of how the electrical circuits will work, like how the nervous system will work. Will it be fast enough? Will it overheat? Shit like that. I think that's what you would use the simulation for as well. So it's not pure kinematics. It's all coming together. And computer-aided design, which is CAD, you might have heard of that, is used to create models of robot parts to visualize its structure. So you maybe start off with, like, a whole picture of what you want it to do. Like, you start off with the arm. You're like, all right, I know I want an arm. And then you use CAD to, like, design the shoulder and the elbow and the hand and all that shit. And you create it all separately, and then you put it together in the CAD. And CAD is often combined with the simulation software. So you design it, and then you test it, all in a simulation. And once you've done that, once you've designed it, and you've put it through the simulation, you're like, all right, this could... Because obviously the simulation isn't perfect. There's so many, like, parameters and, like, different things in an environment, right? Like rust, or, like, I don't fucking know. Is it too hot or too cold or whatever? A simulation can't give you an exact picture of that. And so you use 3D printing or CNC machining to create a physical prototype, usually of a specific component. So let's say you're like, all right, the shoulder. Is the shoulder going to, you know what I mean? Is it going to tear its labrum? Do I have a weak-ass robot do I got to deal with? So you make the shoulder of it, you test that out. Then you make the elbow of it, you test that out. And then you use these prototypes, and the testing it out part is called finite elemental analysis, to test how materials respond to their use. Finite elemental analysis, dude, just call test. We're just testing it out. Why do we have to give it this long-ass name that really doesn't make that much sense? Elemental analysis? I guess you're analyzing how the elements fucking work in the real world, but still, come on, let's just call it testing it out. What are we doing here, guys? These nerds just want to feel smart. All right, I can do it. I can make a robot, dude. You know, they've been working on the auto blow for 70 years, probably since the 3rd century BC when that guy first created that bitch, and he's like, how can I make one that can suck my dick? I gotta think about this. I got to. Maybe he did. Maybe they executed him for it. They knew he was too powerful. They knew that if he had the auto blow, he could take over the empire. Maybe that's how Alexander the Great did what he did. They're like, he fucking conquered everything. He conquered the Mediterranean and the Middle East. How did he do it? He had the auto blow, dude. He was just sucking everyone dry. Just sucking everyone dry and just coming in. You know what I mean? He Trojan horsed them with the auto blow. He's like, a gift for you, a gift for your people. And the king got sucked so dry. The auto blow sucked him so dry that fucking he couldn't defend. Alexander the Great came in, fucking balls full, and conquered their empire. I think that's how he did it. He had this dude make him an auto blow. But anyway, and he did that using finite elemental analysis. He was like, how quickly can this thing make me come? This should make me come in 2 minutes. All right, give it to the Persian king, dude. We're about to conquer his ass. And so these are the steps you do. And then hardware in the loop is a method wherein engineers will integrate data from physical prototype testing, so the finite elemental analysis, into the simulation. So they'll be like, all right, now we know exactly how this thing acts in the real world. We'll program the simulation to reflect how it acts. And then this can give you a more accurate idea. And this is called hardware in the loop. And that is all I have. 46 minutes, I don't know. I feel like for being as tired as I am, and as like just, dude, my stomach is so empty right now, dude. I woke up, my stomach was collapsing in on itself, dude. I had a black hole in my tummy. My tummy had a black hole. But yeah, I feel like I didn't do an awful job. And this is a very complicated subject, dude. Maybe I should have stuck with like Aboriginal culture, you know what I mean? Chilled out a little. Even that is still so fucking complicated. But I think I'm going to have to like pre-record a bunch of fucking episodes because it's spring break coming up and I don't want to fucking record all that shit. Or maybe I'll record one and put it out on Monday. It's not like anyone's listening anyway, so it's not the end of the world if it's a day late, but I feel like consistency is key. But yeah, that's all I've got. We talked a lot about the auto blow. You know, when I'm tired, I can't say like the poignant things that I do about society. God damn, I'm so retarded. All right. Yeah, that's all I've got for this episode. I hope it was at least semi-understandable. It probably wasn't. I probably chose something that was way too complicated, but I am interested in it. I do love robots. They're fucking sick. But yeah, that's all I've got for this episode. I think next week's Sunday episode is going to be the cartels, and then I don't know what I'm going to do for Wednesday, but yeah. All right. Have a good day, good week, good year, good month. Spring break's coming up. Hope that's good for you. And yeah, I'll see you guys on Wednesday, hopefully. Peace.